2, 1, go.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Headwater Science Center 3:30 show, our STEM show, brought to you by the good folks at the Beltrami Electric Company and their Roundup program. So thank you for all of, or it's actually not a company, it's a cooperative. Today, my name is Ann Skoy. My name is that almost every day. I'll be talking to you about bryophytes. So first of all, what are bryophytes? So I hope by the end of our show today, it will be very clear. And thank you all for your patience. I know that talking about mosses, I get super excited and I would have a hard time waiting 3 more minutes. So thank you for your patience. But lots of people, they come here, they look at our tank that has lots of mosses in it, lots of sphagnum moss, one of my favorite mosses. And they look at the tank and say, there's nothing in there, what's going on? And what I hope to do by the end of our presentation day is have, when people look at mosses, instead of saying, oh, there's nothing there, there's nothing going on, for you to leave with a sense of wonder and excitement. And I'm looking around the Headwater Science Center right now, and it's just staff who are vaccinated, and just me, who's also vaccinated, so I think it's okay if I take off my mask. Is everybody comfortable with that? So you can hear and see my voice a little bit better. So we'll be talking about bryophytes today, and we were getting our camera ready. Mosses are very important, and I find them wonderful and amazing. And the problem with people is that we stand up. And the older you get, the more time you spend standing up. But if you take mosses and you get eye level at them, okay, usually by laying down on the ground or going close to them, then you can see all of their amazing detail and their amazing features. So 2 weeks ago, I spoke about mosses and talked a bit about them, but we had lots of guests here, and I got a little bit distracted talking to people, and also distracted by our flowering plants. So I wanted to go more in depth because we didn't really get to show you. We were working on setting up our camera to show you some of the details. How is that coming through? People watching, being able to see it? Mm-hmm. And I promised you 2 weeks ago that I would be able to identify some mosses. And one of the things about being involved with science is you have to learn to be humble and not always, sometimes you can try something, try to figure it out, and sometimes you just need more time and more research. So I spent some time looking at keys, looking at vocabulary to learn mosses, and I have to admit, I cannot confidently identify any of the mosses of Minnesota, or any mosses anywhere by their exact names, and by their scientific names. And there are very few mosses in the world that have species names that people use in everyday language. But let's just take a few minutes and look at some of the details, see how the camera is working, and see if you can see some of the features, and maybe you could come up with, in your own words, how you would describe them. Okay, so I've got the camera on here, and I want to show you, this is actually how to work this way, still not very good at this, some of the special features of mosses. And this is one, and maybe there are things that you are not seeing on these mosses that you see on other plants as we look at them. So we'll talk about that in a moment. It's actually hard to focus it and see what I'm doing here. And actually, we can see these. This is the thing about mosses, is that our actual eyes are probably as good as magnifying because they're very three-dimensional. Is that coming up on the camera? What I want to show you are these parts that are sticking up.
So you can bring it in a bit closer even.
Is that still staying in focus?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yep. Okay. And like I said with mosses, problem are that the more grown up we are, the more time we spend standing up and looking at and not looking at nature up close. And with mosses, one of the best things to do is just to lay down up close and look at it with your eyes, but really take the time to see all the details. All right? And see if we can see how some of them are different. What are we seeing that's different about this one? See how it's much more feathery? right? And we're not seeing any of the structures, right? These are the reproductive structures of the moss that are standing up. I wish I could see the camera I was doing this. Maybe I can actually. Oh yeah, that's actually better. Why don't I just do that? We are learning about how to use all these tools here. Maybe get like, maybe that way, there, upright, with the nice background of the screen just being a color background. I think you can see why. All right. And this is a different type of moss. So these are mosses that, when you look at to identify mosses, you also look at how they grow. Okay. So this is the moss that's growing in a pine forest, a red pine forest. And you notice underneath, what are you seeing? You're seeing this structures here. Okay, we'll talk about that in a moment. I'm going to show you the things that mosses have and don't have that other kinds of plants have. All right? So this is another one here that grows on, right? This one you can see grows on a bark.
A piece of red pine there.
Actually, I don't believe it's red pine. I think it's if you look closely, you can also see right here one of the.
So, Drac asked, do moss have reproductive structures like flowers?
They do not. That is a very good question. All right, so I wanted to look at a few, and then we're going to talk about what they are not, and then what they have. Okay, so mosses are bryophytes. Okay, they're in the family with also with liverworts, which are like mosses. If you look at mosses, they have kind of, I call it kind of like fuzzy features like this. And I don't have any liverworts. I don't have any that live close to places that I go very often that I know about. And they're more blobby, to describe it in a scientific word, a scientific term. But what mosses don't have are these three things. Okay? They don't have any vascular system. And what that is, it's kind of like, it's usually in a tree or in other kinds of plants. What helps water and other nutrients go up and down and travel about the plant. Okay? They also don't have any roots or any flowers. Okay? So we didn't see any of that. You can see they're very flexible, right? They're very flexible. And they have what's rhizoids here, okay? Which, can you see those? Yep. They are not true roots. They don't carry nutrients. They just help them attach to their surfaces. Okay? So that's one of the amazing things about mosses is they can grow on all different kinds of surfaces that are not in the water, but are usually moist and often kind of shady, places where other plants have a hard time growing. Okay? All right. So there are other things that are not mosses, okay? Other kinds of plants. So we talked about vascular plants, right, that have structures that help fluids move around, and that don't have seeds. Okay, so we have some of those, and I brought one in. We have lots of ferns here at the Science Center that you come in and see. I don't know if we have any club mosses here, but we had a nice post on our Facebook page about club mosses recently, and some horsetails. I brought in a horsetail. I talked about this last time. Right, here's another. So you can see here, this is the reproductive structure on the top. Get that to be in focus.
So when you say vascular and non-vascular, is that related to the vascular system that like an animal has?
Yeah, similar, right? It does the same function. All right. So those are our seedless vascular plants. Okay. And then this is another, as I've talked about before, I really like to collect words. So this is another word I want to add to our collection. Maybe I'll sit down here. I can show you my face as I talk to you. There we go. Our gymnosperms. Okay, so sperms is a word for seeds that scientists use. And gymneo, okay, means they're naked. They don't have anything covering them. Okay, and we have lots of those here in Minnesota. We have lots of conifers. Okay, there are also ginkgo trees that are from China, and we have some living in Minnesota too. Okay, so those are seeds that are not really protected. And maybe I'll take a moment while we're talking about gymnosperms, because I didn't bring one in, but I'm going to move the camera. Maybe I'll move it myself here, like over here. I wanted to point out a mural that we have. Is that working? At the Headwater Science Center. And it's also, you can see our tanks here. And some of our fish, right? We will leave the mural there for a moment. And this is a mural by a local artist. Her name is Maureen O'Brien. And maybe we'll go up here so you can see the pine trees. And that would be our gymnosperms. Okay? And if you go back down to the bottom of it, I chose to be in this location because she included some of our wonderful moss, right? That you can see growing on the side, right here on the trees.
Point at it again.
On the back. So maybe you need to come in. Whoops! I'll sing that in there.
Jack says, thought ginkgos were extinct.
Ginkgos are not extinct, no. No, I saw a ginkgo tree last Sunday in Minneapolis. No, in St. Paul. With my own eyes, they're not extinct. So they are native to China. But there used to be more ginkgo trees on Earth than there are now.
Yeah,
a larger percentage of the trees were ginkgos that exist today. Right. Right, the gymnosperms were much more prevalent. During the era of the dinosaurs. And then the angiosperms. And these are the plants that most of us spend most of the time with. Okay? So these are seeds that are protected. Okay? And they're the flowering plants. So we have lots of those, and there are some in the mural. But I also brought in some that I found in my walk this morning. And I encourage all of you to look around and see what you can see. Whoop. Now I'm moving where I am, but I think I can put it here. Good. All right. So what are some angiosperms? What are some flowering plants? Oh, I don't want to spill that any of you. Oh, some.
Okay.
Am I the sound still on?
Yep, should be fine.
All right. That are still. I'm going to flip it around this way so it does not spill. Okay. So I found a couple. Oh, any of you? Nope, no one else has noticed anything. So what I saw on my walk today was a buttercup. This is one that's been around a lot of places for a long time. Not showing up good like that? Yeah. Ranunculus, I believe, is the scientific name. You can really see, this is when I think it's really easy to see the different flowering parts too, and maybe we can have another show just about flowering plants. Okay, or flea babe. I don't know the scientific name for this one. There you go. Is that in focus? Maybe we'll have a different colored background for that. Well, you might have to go out and look for them. These are all things that are easy to spot in northern Minnesota these days. This is a red Hoosier dogwood, which is also flowering. Okay, so again, these are the flowering plants, and when their seeds form, they are protected some way that helps them transport or wait until an opportune time to grow. But our mosses, our bryophytes, bryophytes do not have those. And so some people say they are primitive plants, or not as, maybe not as elegant or not as interesting as other plants. But the mosses, I think that they're very ancient. And I look at them, kind of respect them, of ancient beings who've been around for a long time and can live places where other plants cannot live. And another wonderful thing that they can do is they become habitat for all kinds of animals and all kinds of plants and all kinds of living creature. So another living creature we have not talked about yet, okay, which is not a plant, is this one here. And we looked at this last week, but I want to show you again, or 2 weeks ago, because I think it's so cool, right? This is a kind of mushroom, a puffball, that also reproduces with spores. Here you can see the spores coming out. I always think that is fun. And mosses also reproduce the spores. Like I have a structure right here that often the spores will come out of, and they need to, just what I didn't want to do, just what happened here, they need to have water, okay, for the spores to travel. So they don't travel through the air like the puffball does, but they travel through water. So mosses, in order to reproduce, they need to be in a wet area. But the cool thing about mosses is because they are so small, or one of the cool things, I don't know how many cool things are about mosses, is they can hold the water on them, right? Water is really important for us, and one of the things that makes water so unique to life is that water attaches, the molecules of water stick together basically. And so that, because the moss is so small, because the structures that can hold a lot of water. And that's another reason why mosses are so important, is they can hold water. So, there was Banjostoris is root for bryophyte. There is no, they don't have true roots. However, people pronounce it different ways. They have, again, rhizoids.
The root word for bryophyte, like what's that break down to?
The root word for bryophyte is a Latin word for moss. The Latin word for moss. Good. Are there other questions or more things about them?
So, Dratcast is just like a teaching program.
Yeah, this is a teaching program. We're here at the Headwater Science Center all about teaching and learning.
Yeah, and so we do these shows every day at 3:30 and have been for months at this point. So yeah, little short 20-minute, half-hour show that we'll do. Pretty much every day.
Yeah, and speaking about teaching and learning, we're learning how to use new cameras today. And 2 weeks ago, we started an experiment. I want to show it to you here. Where we put a solution with ground up moss and also some buttermilk on a rock and also on a piece of wood. Okay. And I sprayed it a couple times. We put them in the window at the Headwater Science Center and thought that maybe they would be growing. But anyone from the audience have ideas of why and how this wasn't successful?
So is that little bit that's on there just part of our solution?
I think the little bits that are on there are part of the solution that we put on. I don't see any new growth.
Maybe we didn't get out there and missed it.
I think we didn't get out there and missed it enough, yeah. So the window, right, at the Headwater Science Center is not what I would consider an ideal place for mosses to grow. But it could be that it would grow back. In what I'm learning about identifying mosses, one thing you need to bring along is a spray bottle of water, because mosses, another special thing that I find really fascinating about mosses is they can dry up, okay, and then they won't grow for many, many years, but as soon as they become humid again, or a short period or long period, then they can begin to grow again. So there is a word that I'd like to learn. I don't have it in my brain at this moment about how mosses can be very special. So mosses can even survive in desert and very dry areas.
Is that brumating? Is that what that is? Or is that that's what bears do?
Yeah, there is a word for what mosses do when they stay dry. So I really want to increase appreciation about mosses, because I think with the more extreme temperatures and changes, for example, like we have a very hot day here, hot streak right now, and just 2 weeks ago it was very, very cold in Minnesota. that I think mosses are really adapted to deal with those varying kind of weather and climate kind of things. They're also really good at holding in and absorbing water, which I think is also could be very helpful to have, to control when there's a big rain event, which is also becoming more frequent. Mosses can help absorb water. We have, here at the Headwater Science Center in our bog tank, we have sphagnum moss, and there's a lot of sphagnum moss that grows in the bogs around us, and it can hold, I did know the statistic, like 10 times or even more of its weight in water. Okay, so it can absorb a lot of water. And sphagnum moss has been used for many, many years as a bandage, or also as diapers, or as sanitary pads, because it has that ability to absorb moisture. And also mosses, you can look and you see they're growing, and they grow all kinds of places. I have a hard time growing many plants in my yard because we have many deer, we have hare, snowshoe hare that come through, we have lots of animals, we have chipmunks, we have and other squirrels that come and eat almost everything I try to grow. But I tend that mosses don't taste very good and don't seem to be eaten by very many animals. And so that's another adaptation that mosses have. Another reason why I really, another plug for the wonders of mosses I encourage people to grow them, because there's very little predation of mosses. All right. So sunlight and humidity are some other questions.
That was them guessing why they didn't grow in the window.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe too much sunlight.
It's pretty hot in that window.
And it's very hot, very dry. I mean, mosses can grow in very hot environments, but I think that the humidity was probably too low.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So maybe if we have more questions, I can read some quotes about mosses if you're interested.
So one of the other things, we see mosses a lot in the bogs around here you talked about, and I think one of the other important things with them is the whole carbon sinking aspect of mosses and bogs as a whole.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, mosses can grow in areas where other plants cannot grow. People say they're very small and primitive, but I actually think, I'm gonna, as my cheerleader for mosses today, they are very elegant and small and can survive on surfaces and places where other plants can't. And so often in a natural environment, but also in an urban environment, mosses will often grow on buildings, on anywhere where they're not getting stepped upon too much, and can really also help keep the temperature cooler. They absorb the heat, and in the summer they can regulate temperatures, but also absorb carbon as well. So.
Do you know of anything that eats mosses? Are they an important part of the?
So they are eaten in the Arctic. They're eaten by caribou and also by other plants, other animals there. But in this area, they're not eaten by so many. They're not a major food source of too many animals, and that's another. Yeah, but they do. But they, indirectly, they're a food source of other animals because they create. They create soil, then other plants can grow upon that soil. So they do, they are helpful for animals and plants, and animals that eat animals and plants. All right. Yeah. So maybe I'll read a little quote. And I recommend a book if you're interested in mosses, or actually if you're not interested in mosses, then I recommend this book because it will help you to become interested in mosses and really increase your quality of life. If you are interested in mosses, just about everywhere you go, even in Antarctica, on all the continents, you can find something to enjoy, something to look at and experience. So here's a quote by Robin Wall Kimmerer from her book Gathering Mosses, a natural and cultural history of mosses. Mosses are so very little known by the general public that only a few have been given common names. Most are known solely by their Latin names, a fact which discourages most people from attempting to identify them. But I like the scientific names because they're as beautiful and intricate as the plants they name. Indulge yourself in the words rhythmic and musical rolling off your tongue. So here are 3 that she lists: Dolichica, Stirletta, Thibdium delicatum, and Barbula faulix. So those are three names that she finds beautiful. So I encourage you to look. You can, if you're interested in mosses in Minnesota, you can just whatever search engine you like to use. Look, there's a wonderful field guide of mosses and liverworts of Minnesota. A good keyword to look up is Bryophytes again, that the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources has put together. And there's fascinating details and structures. There's over 500 types of mosses just here in Minnesota alone. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. So come to the Headwater Science Center. We are open now 7 days a week, from at least until Labor Day till the end of the summer. Mondays through Saturdays, we are open from 9:30 until 5. And on Sundays, like today, we're open from 1 until 5 p.m. So come on in, and we'd love to see you in person or to come and